They say the earth forgets, but that's a lie. Beneath every field, every stone, every quiet village long abandoned, something remembers. This is the story of Dalvrek, a place that once danced and sang and smiled. A place that fed itself on silence and soil, each spring buried the living to keep the dead asleep. Most maps no longer mark it, most books refuse to name it. Right, but the earth never forgets. And tonight, neither will you. In the village of Dalvrika, name lost to most maps and dismissed by most historians, there once bloomed a spring unlike any other. Not for its flowers, not for the sun on its fields, but for the ritual they performed beneath the old earth, when the last snow vanished. They called it the sleep of the blessed. To outsiders, it may have looked like a festival. There were bells, music, dancing, children, bread shaped like crowns and crosses. But behind the laughter hung the scent of damp soil, and something else sweet, metallic, clinging. Every spring the villagers would gather beneath the black spire of their chapel, the one with no door and no windows. From within, a single toll of the rusted bell would echo across the valley. That was the call. One would be chosen, always beautiful in some way, and always alone in the world. Orphans, widows, bastard sons. The chosen was meant to be pure in grief, as the village elder once put it. They were always young, never older than 23. That year, it was Elsbeth. And as the moon reached its zenith fat, swollen like a watching eye, they led her beyond the fields to the circle of roots. 17 winters old. A girl with hair like cinder fire and eyes the color of frostbitten stone. Her mother had died the night she was born. Lined with moss and wormwood, the scent of which clung to her breath. She stepped down slowly, as if entering a cradle. Her father, no one ever spoke of him. She lived alone in the seamstress's shed, working needles by candlelight and humming lullabies. No one remembered teaching her. When they came for her, she did not scream. She looked at the elder old mother, Brynin, simply nodded. It rose from the throats of the gathered, low and trembling like the hum of bees inside a hollow tree. Is it my time? Bryn, gnarled like a tree struck by lightning, touched Elsbeth's face. Even as the earth reached her chin, her lips whispered that lullaby, the one no one else knew. You've always known it would be. No priests. Hid it only memory, passed from one chapped mouth to another. And in that memory, the chosen were not sacrificed. No, they were buried alive as an offering to the slumbering spirits beneath the hills, those who protected the harvest, turned rot into bread, sorrow into song. The ritual had no books, or so they said. Elsbeth was bathed in lavender and sheep's milk. Her hair was braided with thistle and red thread. There was a pit, freshly dug, 6 feet deep. Someone began to sing. It wasn't a hymn. It was an old melody, older than language. They placed a loaf of bread at her feet, a small vial of honey, a ribbon from a child's doll. Then one handful of soil at a time they began to bury her. Elsbeth did not cry. Her chest rose and fell with the calm of the truly damned, and then she was gone. For 7 days, no one entered the circle of roots. The soil was left untouched. No footsteps marred the ground. No birds nested in the trees that loomed above. It was as if the forest itself had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something that no one dared name aloud. But on the 8th day, the earth began to weep. Birds, once thick on the rooftops, vanished into the gray sky without song. Then the wells soured, not with blood, as old tales might suggest, but with something stranger memory, a confirmation that Elsbeth had passed into the below, where she would walk among the ancient ones in darkness, her breath slow, her heart soft, her soul forever stitched to the roots of the valley. Women who drank from them saw faces they had forgotten, heard voices of the dead whispering in their sleep. It started with the animals. The hounds refused to eat. The goats kicked and bled at their own hooves. The villagers said it was a sign, called it a responsive signal that the earth had accepted its gift. But not all were at peace. There was a boy, Anders, 19 winters, blacksmith's apprentice. He had loved Elsbeth once, or perhaps still did. He had once given her a brooch carved from bone, shaped like a moth. She never wore it, but she kept it. On the night she was taken, Anders had stood at the back of the crowd, jaw clenched, fingers white around a hammer he never lifted. And now, 7 nights later, he dreamt of her. Not as a ghost, not as a spirit. The moon was thin, a sliver of rust behind clouds, carried a lantern and a shovel, and his hands shook with something colder than fear conviction. But as a girl, gasping, clawing upward through choking earth, her lips cracked and blue, her fingers bloody from scraping stone, her lullaby had turned to a scream. Anders awoke, soaked in sweat, the taste of soil in his mouth. It had hardened as if trying to protect what lay beneath. But Anders was strong. Each strike of the shovel was a prayer. Each handful cast aside, a betrayal of tradition. He tried to tell old Mother Bryn. She shook her head. Most said the chosen were laid straight into the earth, embraced by mud and worm. But this was a box, blackened and old, the wood scored with symbols he couldn't read. Grief takes strange shapes. Boy. He tried the village scribe. The man had gouged out his own eyes years before, claimed he could see more clearly without them. She's with the rooted ones now, he whispered, metal and sacred rot. Anders did not care. The next night he went to the circle of roots. He dug. And as he did, the earth began to change. Lips parted. Hands crossed over her chest, clutching the brooch he had given her. It was not soft, not the loam of spring. He hit something. Not her body. Wood a coffin. Only lullabies and the weight of a village's belief pressing down on her lungs. He hadn't known they used one. The nails were rusted, yet untouched by time. He pried the lid open. And there she was, Elsbeth, his eyes closed. But she wasn't dead. Now her irises were laced with something darker, threaded with veins of root and coal. Her gaze didn't see him. It saw through him. Her chest rose barely, her breath a thin thread of frost. She had lasted 8 days. 8 days beneath soil and silence. No air, no light. Anders screamed. Not in horror, in awe. In rage, she opened her eyes. Not fully just enough. They were not the same. Gone was the color of frostbitten stone. Anders reached down. Her hand moved. So did the soil. Around him, the ground pulsed, as if it too were breathing. He did not lift her. He could not. Ow. The forest moaned. Behind him, a sound like teeth grinding against bark rose from the trees. Anders ran, back to the village, back to denial. He said nothing, but he left the grave open, and Elsbeth did not sleep. 3 days passed. Rain came not from clouds, but from mist. A heavy, colorless fog that clung to the skin like sweat from a dying fever. She sat beside the fire muttering in an old tongue, fingers wrapped around a bundle of dried nettles and bone dice. On the 4th morning, she was found with soil beneath her nails and mud packed behind her teeth, as though she had tried to swallow the earth itself. The villagers wrapped cloth over their mouths and spoke only in murmurs. Something had shifted, and though no one could name it, they all felt it. Old Mother Bryn refused to eat. Anders had not spoken since that night. He would not step near the forge. He wandered the village like a man already dead, eyes sunken, lips moving without sound. Alone in her hut, grinding yarrow root for a stillbirth, she heard a song from beneath the floorboards, a lullaby fractured, notes misplaced, like teeth knocked loose. She bent down, ear to the planks, and screamed. Children avoided him. Dogs snarled as he passed, kept his hands wrapped in linen, though no one saw any wounds. Only Elsbeth knew. She had not returned to the village, not in body. But she had begun to whisper. But the next day, her house was abandoned. All that remained was a basin filled with black water and a lock of hair, still wet, still warm. The walls breathed. The altar was gone, replaced by a root structure that pulsed like a living organ, veins of dark sap running through bark that twitched when he approached. The first to hear her was the midwife on Selma. He bore a lantern with no flame, just a shard of mirror and a drop of his own blood smeared across the glass. In his hand he carried Elsbeth's brooch, now cracked down the middle. No one found what she saw. A mason threw himself into the river and never rose. A child claimed to see a girl with no shadow, standing outside his window, asking for bread. Then came the others. A shepherd's flock tore themselves open on Thornbush's eyes, wide with terror. By the seventh night, the village doors were all bolted. Inside the chapel, the one with no doors, no windows, Bryn had once sealed something. A truth too old for parchment, a secret too dangerous to die. But it was not sealed well enough.
Anders returned to it,
Dragging his own shadow behind him like a chain. The chapel welcomed him. And with each new burial, the roots tightened their grip not just on the village, but on the land itself. The chosen were never gifts, they were bonds. Anchors to keep something asleep, something ancient, something that hungered for connection, not sacrifice. Inside, the air smelled of damp wool and copper. On the wall was a carving. Teravalan Sanganam, the earth desires blood. Anders laughed. In the darkness, he heard her voice not from without, but from within, not the laugh of madness, the laugh of recognition. He knelt before the root. She's not the first, he whispered. Inside was only one thing. Elsbeth's brooch, now grown long and twisted like the stem of a flower. He placed the brooch at the base. She won't be the last. And the root opened. Not like a door, not like a wound, but like an eye. It showed him a history buried beneath centuries of dirt and silence. Each chosen soul was pressed into the soil like seeds. And now, Elsbeth had awoken, not alone. Below the ground, she was not buried. She was planted, and something had bloomed. Anders staggered back, bile in his throat. The chapel trembled, the lantern shattered. You opened the box, and then silence. The villagers gathered the next morning to find the chapel split open like a fruit, its walls curled inward, wood warped and wet. No one spoke, not of Anders, not of Elsbeth, but they knew. The sleep of the blessed had ended, and what had once slept now listened. Spring passed. Summer came and went without bloom. The fields failed. The wheat turned to ash in the hand. The barley bent low, as if ashamed to grow. Even the elder trees, whose roots reached deeper than memory, shed their leaves in mid-July, their branches shriveled, as if scorched from within, and still. The earth whispered, not in words, in movement, in breath. Beneath every footstep, villagers felt the pulse, that low, slow heartbeat that was no longer entirely underground. And at night, the songs returned. No voice carried it. It simply was like mist, or rot present, even in silence. Children began to murmur it in their sleep. One by one, the villagers stopped calling it a song. They began calling it what it truly was. Elsbeth's lullaby, warped through soil and sorrow, hummed beneath floorboards and behind walls. Some never made it out of their doors. One man, a tanner named Rule, was found nailed to his own roof, eyes pecked clean, mouth filled with dirt, a summons. They tried to flee. Some made it as far as the river. Old Mother Bryn was the last to understand. The ritual had never been about appeasement. It had always been about containment. The chosen weren't offerings, they were locks. Their breath, their blood, their spirit was used to bind something vast beneath the valley. And Elsbeth had broken the chain, not from malice, but because she had been loved. That small, fragile truth that a girl buried alive had been loved by a boy too foolish to obey fear was enough to unravel generations of silence. Because love, as it turns out, does not obey burial. And now she was awake.
Oh.
But she was no longer just Elsbeth. She rose with the roots, blooming not as flower nor ghost, but as a reminder. Her skin had paled to a shade beyond white. Her veins ran with something thicker than blood. Her eyes, they no longer blinked. The Elsbeth who stitched ribbons by firelight, who hummed lullabies to herself in the dark, had been swallowed by the thing that grew inside, her fed by breathlessness and root by betrayal and memory. She came back not as a girl, but as a hollow, a walking echo of sorrow, clothed in soil and silence. She did not walk into the village. She rose from it. Through the church's foundation, through the stones of the chapel floor, through the cracks in every hearth and cellar, a reminder that the earth remembers, that silence is never eternal, and that every song, no matter how soft, leaves an echo. By the time the first snows came, Dalvik was no longer a village. It had no people, no livestock, no songbirds, only stone and vines, and a hum so low it rattled the bones of any who stepped near. The maps removed its name. The priests refuse to speak of it, but travelers still tell stories. Of a valley where the wind sounds like a girl singing. Of a flower-shaped brooch found buried in frost-covered moss, and of a place where, if you listen long enough, the earth begins to breathe beneath your feet. They say her name was Elsbeth, and she still sings, not for you, not to you, but through you. Because once long ago, someone opened the box, and the earth never forgot. Elsbeth's lullaby still hums beneath the roots, not in memory, not in song, but in the bones of the land itself. They buried her, believing they were keeping the world safe. But love, even buried 6 feet deep, can bloom into something unholy. Dalvrek is gone, but if you ever find yourself in a valley where no birds sing, where the soil feels warm beneath your feet, don't listen too closely, because sometimes what sings beneath the earth isn't waiting to be remembered. It's waiting to return.